Hello, this afternoon for Seeking Our Inner Being, we welcome Deepti to share with us. Hello Deepti.
Hi.
Nice to have you with us. Shall we begin with, are you in contact with your inner being? And if so, tell us, share that inner journey, beginning of this inner journey.
I think it's almost the only thing that gives purpose to life, meaning and purpose. I could say that since I began to think, I was looking for something, and then I was 16 when we came as a family, thanks to my father, and we came, it was Sri Aurobindo's birth centenary, and we happened to turn up just the day before Mother's birthday, and it was the moment of Matri Mandir's, the foundation of Matri Mandir, and Mother's birthday, Sri Aurobindo's centenary. And because of my father's background, and he had come out of this very difficult moment in Indian history, the war that gave birth to Bangladesh, and Mother was very, very interested in this war. And so we had her darshan. We had her darshan on the 22nd as a family, on the 22nd of February. And it changed all our lives, not just mine. It kind of solved this quest I had, a sense of direction, a sense of purpose. I would say that until then I had so many things that I did not want to do. And then finding Sri Aurobindo, finding what he says about the evolutionary manifestation and how evolution continues and humanity was a transitional species and mankind would be surpassed. I couldn't believe that someone had said that, because that was kind of like the inchoate sense in my being, but that someone could formulate in such coherent terms a whole program of action. It was like magic. And I would say since then, that's what I came to do. I found out, and I actually didn't choose Auroville. I came to Sri Aurobindo. And meeting Mother, it's this, I have, you know, all of us remember. My sisters were much younger than I. They also remember.
And how old were you, Deepti?
16.
16.
So first my father sat at her feet, and then my mother, and we are lined up in her room, and each one is going in. So I'm number 3, and then my 2 younger sisters are 4 and 5. The youngest is only 6. And I sit at her feet, and I just disappear. I have no sense. My sense is, when I go into the room, I have a sense of an elderly lady. There is a power in the room, but the moment I sit at her feet, she just takes everything away of the present being that I am. And when I come down, we are at the bottom of the stairs, and someone notices the roses we have in our hand. She gave each of us a rose, and that was it. I think meeting the Mother, she says when you come before her, she gives you a bath of, she calls it the bath of the Lord, but basically she channels the highest truth of manifestation, and she pulls out from within you the deepest truth of your particular manifestation. And so there's a kind of a reversal that takes place. Then, of course, because the psychic is so deep, it's the inmost being, and there are all these layers to traverse. I would say my journey since then has been to find, work upon, and change each of these layers. But if the psychic wasn't there, or let's say it's because the psychic is there that there is always a sense of gratitude and always a sense of magic. She says about Auroville that all here, she calls the air of Auroville miracle, those little blue flowers that are growing wild all over Auroville. And I've always had that sense, not because of the external circumstances. Auroville has always been in difficulty, because if you look at it intellectually, if you look at it from the point of view of life, Auroville is impossible. we are not, as human beings, capable of creating a collectivity that's based on the soul truth. But what has made Auroville and what has given it the process of manifestation is the highest truth. And to keep in touch with that is kind of the only purpose of life.
So can I take you back to, you mentioned that there was already this seeking, this questioning before you came to Mother's feet. And then you had this inside out almost moment at Mother's feet. So this is the most significant. From there, how did the quest or the journey evolve?
So I was 16, and I don't think it's an age where your parents allow you to just make your own choices. So it took me 3 years. Actually, last week I completed 49 years since I came. So I began to visit. I would travel across. My father was posted in Kashmir. He was in the armed forces, so he was in Kashmir. My mother was also a doctor in the army. And so I would travel across the country on my own. And there was someone who would receive me in Pondicherry at the ashram. And I took away Savitri with me. So as a 16-year-old, the book I carried away was Savitri. And for the next 3 years, wherever I was, Savitri became my guide. All my questions would be answered by Savitri. And I find that really interesting because I didn't know that Sri Aurobindo speaks of himself as a poet. He's written philosophy, but he says, I'm a poet. So just by circumstances, because I love poetry, I came into contact with what he considers the profoundest expression of what he came to do on earth. And all the questions I had, and I had 1,000 questions. I have a very, a mind that doesn't sit quiet. I got my answers from poetry. So poetry puts you into this dimension of experience. It puts you into, so I remember reading book 11, book 6. There were books that were just the ones, I never started to read things from page 1 to the end. And again, I discovered later that Mother says, just open it anywhere and you can come in contact. So I kind of was doing that from the beginning. And I would say that it is Savitri that organized my life. Then it was on my 3rd visit to Pondicherry, and I was staying in Golkund, which was just a magical space to be in. The ashram was lovely. I was received received by a great affection and love. So there was no issue except that it was so settled that somehow, you know, action, development, karma, dharma kshetra became Auroville. So from the beginning I was working, I actually started to work at the architect's office. I was still a teenager. And they needed a secretary, so I learned typing, and I'm just doing things and actually educating myself. Because while I was staying in Golkund, this was the time when they were bringing out Mother's collected works. And so some of the best proofreaders in the ashram, you know, they proofread every text about 7 or 8 times. So they would use me as the reader. So I would be reading and they would be correcting. It was magical because I was coming in touch with Mother's words through a process of work. And then somebody in the ashram had translated Satprem's On the Way to Supermanhood. It was finally not accepted by Satprem, that translation, and she needed it to be typed up. So I sat and typed On the Way to Supermanhood, and I came into contact with these ideas of the sociology of the next step, the new consciousness. So somehow, from the very beginning, some great consciousness was taking charge of my education. And so I was reading the Mother, I was coming in contact with the ideas of the next step through some of the things that Satprem writes. And I came later to some of Sri Aurobindo's writings. I have always wanted to understand, but that's not been the main purpose. The main center of thought and action has been the heart, and that's been the one that has controlled what I should do and not do. So when I have to do something, I have to check there. Is it okay? Is it not? And it seems to me that if you are constantly, before you act, looking inside and getting a deeper guidance, listening to that voice, the voice grows and allows you to listen to it more often. So I would say I've had a life of grace because Auroville's been very difficult, no question. But you put the difficulty before that, and it doesn't matter, because who says manifestation is meant to be easy? And who says that human nature is good enough? And we all carry all those layers. So if you see some problems outside, turn inside. Solve the problem inside you. There were 2, 3 things I settled upon from Mother, which became my guiding principles. She says, when a blow comes, look within and see what is the weakness that invites the blow, and the blow becomes a bliss. So that's been my standard. It's not that I live in my psychic, no, but because I take everything that happens to me from that sense of converting the difficulty into something else, that creates a pattern of development. And the other thing she says is, one must learn how to be alone with the infinite and the absolute in the midst of all circumstances. She says, in life, you have to be alone. So that's what I cling to. Can I be alone with that? Whatever I'm doing outwardly. So somehow to have that inwardness always. I would say that is the best we can do in the present circumstances.
Great. Really interesting. And I just want to return a little bit to how your awareness or this manifestation of this contact, this inner voice, opening up to that, how does that arise for you? Is there some practices you do or some routine you have? Is it?
Well, one of the most powerful methodologies is the japa. And somehow you get your body into the pattern. We have a mechanical mind. And if you can get it into the pattern of repeating, it's the kind of mind that catches a song and then the song goes on in your head. Well, convert it to the mantra. Start to say something. So I have patterns of words that I repeat. The other thing I think is a key is to be always very quiet. If you're agitated, if you are upset, you don't hear anything. You know, the senses are closed then. I mean, the senses are turned outside, but the inner senses are closed. So you have to be very quiet. And when you are very quiet, and it's not as if life doesn't make you agitated, because things can come at you, but the moment they do, you know, in India we have this image of a tortoise that pulls its legs in, pulls its head in. You pull yourself in, you pull yourself into a center, and then you wait, and something changes. But I would say one of the key positions is to be grateful. Because if you're grateful for whatever comes to you, you are not going to be in the wrong attitude. Gratitude is a psychic attitude.
And if you can even take the challenges as grace, no? And be grateful for that.
She says when a blow comes, it becomes a grace when you can convert it. So it's kind of a standard. You know, there are standards of conduct that we need to create for ourselves. And a society that turns inward has to have those standards. And it's not as if it's not possible to do that collectively too, but it starts with each individual.
Yeah. One more important question, which I think can help all of us to be shared, is, are there particular traps or cautions or things to be hesitant about while we're on this quest?
You know how often Mother says in her conversations that one has to accept, not to understand. So I would say the biggest trap is to think you know. that you have to come to the world with the sense that, I don't know, the world is recreating itself at every moment. So to be fresh, to be young, to remain open is almost like a key. So people who say, I know, that's tricky. You're getting into trouble when you think you know, because we do not know. We can only try to be as true as possible. And she says that Auroville will be if everyone seeks sincerity. So if your standard is you absolutely do not put anything outside yourself which is insincere, that's a good standard.
Not always beautiful. It's been wonderful, Deepti. Was there anything that you feel unfulfilled in expressing? Anything that you'd like to add, or?
No, the only thing I would say is I don't like speaking about myself. And so I'm kind of doing this because I think as a collectivity we need to trust that each of us is here because our soul chose it, and that the best we can do is to allow that soul, which is a being of power, to come forward. And everyone should do that before anything else can change. And if we do, we will create. She says that in one of her conversations, that it's possible to lift yourself above the human condition if you can create a collectivity of aspirants. So that's what we are supposed to be.
Wonderful. And thank you so much.